Hello and welcome back, and today we're back to working on the Centurion, most notably this big blue beast right next to me. This is the printer. This is a project that a lot of people have been asking to see, but I have been absolutely terrified of because I have never restored a printer in my life, and starting with this one is kind of like diving into the deep end both feet first. So we're kind of breaking new ground here, or at least I am. But this is a 125 line per minute Data 100 chain printer. It has this insane chain that spins around at high speed with 132 hammers, and it can really send paper flying out the top. So I'm very excited to get it up and going. In the previous episode, all we did was take a look at the power supply. We pulled it out of the tray on the bottom, got it up onto the bench, checked the capacitors. Everything seemed to be in pretty good shape. So we put it back in, turned it on, and tested the power. Now we got a couple of interesting voltages out of it. We got plus 30 volts, plus 10 volts, plus 5 volts, and minus 12 volts. The plus 30 volts is obviously the voltage for the hammer drivers. Plus 5 volts makes sense. That's going to be for all of the TTL logic inside of it. And minus 12 volts makes sense as well. There's going to be some negative bias voltage going on. It was the plus 10 volts that threw me for a loop. And a lot of people left comments saying that seems like a very strange number. It should be maybe plus 12. That would make more sense. So it was really hard to confirm whether that was accurate or we had some problem in the power supply. But since that episode, a personal role model of mine, David Guesswain, has reached out. Now, David has an amazing collection of stuff. Most notably has a PDP-8, which also happens to have a Data 100 printer connected to it. This exact printer, he's got one up and running. And so the ability to talk to David was just epic. So David, if you're watching, hi, thank you so much for reaching out. But David also happened to have the manual for the Data 100 printer scanned and sent me the PDF of it. So the very first thing I did when digging through the manual was to dive down into the schematics and find the schematic for the power supply, which I have right here. And if we look right here, it says output 10 volt DC. So our power supply is working 100% perfectly. It's putting out the exact voltages it's supposed to. So that means that now we are free to dive into the rest of the system, the terrifying bit up top here. Now there's a lot of mechanical things that are going on in here, so I'm not too sure how far apart I want to take this. If we take it too far apart, we lose alignment and adjustment on a ton of things, and we're essentially starting from scratch. So my thinking is that this thing is pretty close to being in good enough shape to run. And sure, some things might be out of alignment, but without actually seeing a test print, we won't know what is out of alignment. So I'm thinking I'm only going to take it far enough apart to make sure that everything is clean and anything that needs lubricating gets lubricated. Then I'm going to put it back together and just throw some electrons at it and see what happens. That'll give us a baseline so we know where to go forwards from here. So hopefully we're going to see something pretty exciting in this episode. I'm hoping to actually flip some power on into it, but I don't have any idea how far we'll get, and there's only really one way to know, and that's just to hop into it and get started. In order to keep the room in some semblance of order, I always put everything back together again after I get done filming a video. So we got to take the whole thing back apart again. And so we'll start by removing the top, followed by the paper guide, and then all of the panels, and then finally the cards in the card cage. Then I'll pull the rear panel off, giving access to the final card. And once it is slid out, I have access to all of the cables, which I can then disconnect and finally get this card out. This little front panel switch assembly connects to the card we just removed, so it's actually completely free. Next, let's get to the fun stuff. This front cover is held on with 4 little screws, and then it pulls right off, revealing a fluorescent light. I wasn't expecting that. The light is buried so deep in the system, I initially thought it had to be for an optical sensor or something like that. But all I could find about it in the manual was it just being labeled as lamp in the parts section. Talking with Ken about this, it's exactly what it sounds like. A light to shine on the paper so you can see what's being printed without having to open the top. At any rate, let's continue taking panels off. Moving on to this top cover for the flywheel next. It's held in with 2 screws, which also hold on the panel beneath it. There's one more screw on that panel, and then it comes away, giving us our first proper look at the character chain. It's absolutely insane to think that the hammers can strike this thing at the right timing. What do I mean by that? Well, this chain has all of the characters that the printer can print on it. The precise position of the chain as it spins is measured using transducers on the drive wheels. Then, sitting right next to this spinning chain are all the hammers. In between the spinning chain and the hammers are the paper and the ribbon. If we want to type the letter A, for example, the internal wizardry knows exactly where that A is on the chain as it is spinning. As that A swings by in front of the hammer that is located where we want to type the A, the hammer fires, sandwiching the paper and ribbon in between it and the letter A, imprinting that letter onto the paper. But the hammer has to hit at the exact perfect time, or we'll get the wrong character because the chain will have moved on. And it also has to hit for a very precise amount of time. If it stays out for too long, it'll smear as the chain drags by. It's a delicate act of precision timing and directed violence, and I absolutely love it. Since the chain is spinning at high speed, it's going to pick up static electricity though. This little brush here grounds the characters out as they swing by. Or at least that's what I think this brush is for. I can't find any mention of it in the manual. Continuing with disassembly, let's rotate the chain carriage out of the way, and then we'll get this ribbon off. This is a 1 inch by 150 foot multi-pass cloth ribbon. I'm not actually sure where to find a new one of these, so if you know, leave a comment below letting me know. I would love to replace this. This is as far as I'm going to take it down, I think. I could try to go a little further, maybe try to get the backplane out or something like that, but man, I'm really scared of getting it to a point where either I don't know how to get it back together correctly, or it's so far out of alignment or adjustment that it just doesn't ever want to work correctly. Right now, it's in a state where it had last been used, and we haven't pushed anything out of alignment or adjustment short of what would have moved out of alignment from moving it. So I have pretty good access to everything. I think I can get it all nice and clean and get all of the really big moving parts lubricated correctly. And then, I don't know, put it all back together and flip a switch or something. We do still have to find a new one of these fluorescent tubes. It looks like this one may be burned out over here on the end. So I need to run down to the hardware store and see if I can get another one of these. But I'm just gonna set the time lapse up and get to work cleaning this thing up. Because I think once it shines up and cleans up, it will be pretty close to being able to just flip a switch and see what happens. So, well, I'm just gonna get to work. I'm going to start cleanup here on the bottom actually. There's little spots of rust growing here and there on the blue frame, but a little scrubbing with Simple Green cleans it up well enough that they are mostly invisible. Next, I want to remove the remnants of the old sound deadening on the door and inside. This way I can lay down new sound deadening material, but getting this old stuff off is a proper pain. This is a terrible angle, but here you can barely see the new sound deadening material that I'm laying down. It's just sticky backed butyl type sound deadening, often used on the floorboards of cars. I use this same stuff on the Centurion chassis, and it's quite good for being so easy to work with. With the bottom done, I'll move up to the top and start vacuuming like crazy. Now, before you go ballistic about vacuums creating static electricity, all of the PCBs have been removed out of here and the backplane is totally passive. So there's nothing on here that I can fry with static electricity out of this vacuum. Now, I'm actually using a Scotch pad to break all of the grime up so I can then vacuum it up. And I just started on one side and worked my way around, and then I went back and did the same thing again, only with Simple Greens and rags this time. Next, I want to try and clean the ink residue off of the chain. I started with a toothbrush and a light spritz of brake cleaner, which worked great. Then I followed up with more Simple Green to get any brake cleaner residue off.
And finally, I want to lubricate the bearings for the chain. They already felt pretty smooth, but a little extra oil to reliquefy the grease inside the bearings couldn't hurt. Then it's just time to start putting things back together enough for a test.
I've got it looking a lot cleaner, and it's pretty much back together. There's still some things that we got to handle, like this cable, for instance, that goes to the front panel here. It's still all gummy and gross, so I'm going to need to spend some time with that cable, but that's something that isn't vital to it working, and it's really boring to show on camera. Also, there's an AC fan over there that is gummed up and dead, so I need to pull that AC fan out and put a different AC fan in. I've got some spares around here somewhere. I'll hunt one of those down after the camera's off and the sun's gone down, and we'll swap that out later. But man, I really think, like I said, we're in a weird spot. We could take it completely apart and do essentially a frame-off restoration, but I don't think that's necessary. I don't think this needs to be a restoration. It could just be a refresh, a cleaning. And that's what we've done. We've cleaned it up, put a new light bulb in it, and I think we just need to flip the switch. So I'm gonna bring the camera in a lot closer so you guys can see what goes up in smoke, if hopefully nothing goes up in smoke, but I'm gonna bring the camera in a lot closer and flip the switch. And oh man, hopefully everything goes well. Well, about 9 million things can go wrong, but we won't know what has gone wrong until we just send it. So, oh man, here goes nothing. Oh, Jesus. Oh, the light came on. My ribbon unwound itself. I may have the ribbon on incorrectly. The chain is definitely spinning. It is terrifying. This switch up here is test. Something should happen. Oh, I've definitely got the ribbon on incorrectly. But it was it was feeding. I've definitely got the ribbon on wrong because it's unwinding this side of the ribbon, so the ribbon isn't pulling and keeping tension. So we'll spin it down and fix that, and then we'll try the test again. All right, round two. I think I've got the ribbon on correctly this time. Yeah, I think that's right. I hope that's right. The chain is definitely spinning up. Oh, it's making all sorts of noises. All right, let's flip that test switch one more time. It's trying. We've got a little bit of something printing here. We're getting more and more showing up as we get deeper into the print. Looks like we're only getting numbers though. It's making all sorts of funny noises. As the night wore on yesterday, I let it churn out a few more pages off camera just to see if it would shake, rattle, and roll itself into actually working fully. Now, when I flip this switch over here to put it into test, all it's doing is printing a $sign 132 times per line on repeat. It just prints the same symbol over and over and over again. And as we got deeper into it, we actually got pretty close to achieving that. This page right here, we can see that there's actually a couple of lines where that looks like it happened, but we have some interesting problems still happening in other places. This line, for example, is completely terrible, and we have these two columns that kind of happen right around the center that just isn't quite right. We're getting like double characters or smearing or some other weird problem. But this is actually exactly what I was hoping to see by just flipping the switch and sending it. Without actually seeing any printouts come out of it, we don't have a clue where to start troubleshooting that something might be incorrect. But now that we have a printout, we actually have a kind of vector to run down. And looking through the manual and most importantly, talking with Ken Romaine yesterday, the chief suggestion was to take a look behind the paper at the hammers. And there's a little metal cover over the hammers. And I didn't take that off yesterday because I wasn't really familiar familiar with the system, but it turns out that I can take that off, and looking at it, it looks like it's actually loose. So what we're going to do is get this paper out of there, fold the front open, pull that panel off, and take a look at what we see behind there. There's supposed to be some Mylar strips and stuff like that. So hopefully that's the issue that we're coming up against, and we can get this thing printing cleanly here shortly. But let's go ahead and pull that panel off and see what's lurking behind.
One quick aside I noticed while working on this, the ribbon is actually spread across the chain at an angle. This ensures that the entire width of the ribbon is used, as well as that the farthest right or left, depending on which way the ribbon is cycling, characters get a proper amount of ink to hammer with. I thought that was a cool little design. Anyways, let's get the paper out of the way by popping it off the tractor feeds, and here you can see just how loose this cover plate was. It's supposed to have 6 screws in it, but mine only had 3. Someone had been in here before and did a bad job of it. With the 3 remaining screws removed though, it pulls right off, and oh man, just look at all of the hammers.
It's going to be almost impossible to see, but there's a little Mylar strip that sits in between the hammer and the coil here. And this Mylar strip is kind of like a cushion between the actual magnetic surface of the coil and the iron part of the hammer. And this ensures like proper flight time and proper release of the hammer. Now it looked intact at first, but I certainly can't show this to you, but maybe you can hear the difference here. So as you can hear, this particular hammer here is not hitting any Mylar at all. It is straight up metal to metal contact. That's going to change the distance that it moves out and could be causing the smearing that we're seeing. And this particular hammer right here just so happens to be character number 41, which is right where we have a kind of smearing problem going on. So there's a good chance that that Mylar film in between there is our problem. I just need to figure out how to get it out and then also figure out what I can replace it with and get new stuff in. The upper Mylar strip was completely broken in 2 at hammer 41, but I was able to get the remaining 2/3 of it out in one piece. And boy howdy is it in rough shape. The hammers had worn several holes straight through the strip, and it was split or cracked in multiple places. And since I can't just run down to the local Data 100 store and get new Mylar strips, I'm gonna have to channel my inner MacGyver here. This is a plastic file folder that Mrs. Usagi has donated to the cause, and I'll mark the width and then slice it using a metal brake. Absolutely not the right tool for the job, but it got the job done all the same. Then I just need to snake it into place between the hammers and coils, and it was crazy fiddly, but honestly, it was actually a lot less difficult than I thought it was going to be. New Mylar strips are in. Let's give it a test. Hopefully this fixes it. Whoa, that didn't fix it. It's very different though. Well, we still have our giant columns of errors going on there, only every other character is really weak now. And actually, that makes sense. The new plastic that I slid in is quite a bit thicker than the original Mylar that I pulled out. And the original Mylar had tons of holes in it, so the hammers were traveling much further on the old Mylar strips than they are on the new Mylar strips. So I was trying to think how I can move the hammers a little closer to the paper so that I can get a stronger impact into the ribbon and maybe get darker characters. And looking around up here, the most obvious adjustment is the one right here that says density adjust, and it has a little arrow on it that says turn clockwise for darker. So I started turning these clockwise. I actually cracked the lock nuts loose so I could crank them pretty deep clockwise. This moves the whole carriage closer to the paper and should give me darker colors. And while I was doing that, all of a sudden it just spit out an entire page with no errors. Look at that, our columns are gone. The letters are still weak and there's a bad character here or there, but that is a working printer. Right up until it stopped working again. What was happening was it was printing and it was coming up and it was looking fantastic. And all of a sudden the page that was above it folded over. And when that page folded over, it pushed the page that was being printed into a different orientation. And all of a sudden our smeared columns came back. So we have some weird adjustment problem going on between the paper, the hammers, and the ribbon. And there's a lot of adjustment down there that we can tweak and play with. So I think we can probably get this thing working perfectly. And also, the paper is supposed to have this big smooth arc of a cage that it floats across. And we don't have that on there right now. So as the paper folds over, it's definitely pushing things into a strange position. Now, we're still not quite there. There's still something evil lurking inside because the entire carriage seems to move left to right electromechanically. Something is moving it left to right. And it does it even after you stop printing, and it does it a little erratically. So I think we've got a flaky connection or a flaky switch somewhere in there that has to do with that electromechanical movement, and that's going to take a lot more diving into it. So I am gonna take whatever victories I can, because when we started this episode, I had no clue if this thing would even turn on. And here we are with at least one page that printed completely successfully. Now, it took me about 17 pages to get there. And I got a feeling it's gonna take probably about another 70 pages until we're confident that it's working correctly. But man, that is awesome. So in the next episode, we're gonna keep chasing those gremlins out, and I think the longer we run it, the better it's going to get. We're also gonna clean up the top case, put some sound deadening in it, clean up all of the cage, put it back on, and once it's looking nice and looking like it's fitting the part, we're gonna plug it into the Centurion itself, spin it up, and start running some of the test prints that it has on it. Centurion has a wonderful little barber pole test pattern that prints all of the characters, which will be really nice to see because the test print that's built into the printer itself only prints $signs. So it'll be good to see if all of the characters are printing correctly. So this project is shaping up way better than I thought it would. I thought this thing was gonna keep me on my on my heels, on the back foot for far longer than it is. But I really think we can hammer out the gremlins, and I'm really excited to see this thing start printing stuff off of the Centurion. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you stick around for the next episode because it's going to be awesome.